G'day Captain, this is Admiral Revan speaking. Hope you're doing well. It's great to be back. The Johnston arrived in the late patch 13.5 and early 13.6, just in time for the 4th of July event, and honestly that this warship has been very interesting. First and foremost, I mean, like, there's a lot of naval history about this warship, but at the same time that a lot of people had mixed feelings about this warship, but when I first looked at it, I thought it was pretty cool. Honestly, the next question I have to ask myself is the Johnston really worthwhile getting? Now, I have to admit though, as we dive into the armory for this right now, gonna be checking out what's available. So we've got the Wings of Freedom, the ship bundles, as you know, and also the Stars and Stripes. And in here with the Wings of Freedom, that you get the opportunity to get some 1 of 9 different warships, which is pretty cool. And you're gonna get some good rewards as well. But along the way, when I was looking at this very carefully, I mean, like, you see the California, and I have to say, for a tier 7 battleship, it is actually one of the cheapest battleships I have ever seen in the game to get, as you all know. I mean, like, I have to say that, you know, that's actually a pretty sweet deal right there. The other thing about it all is that as I look at this very closely, but the whole bundles and everything that's available, the Johnston and the Rhode Island are both expensive, but they have a lot of things in the bundles that are probably pretty good, and some are not so great. But you get a flag, 10-point commander, and you get some extra, you know, rewards around it as well too. But let's talk more about the Johnston. When I first saw it on the previous shop, I was absolutely mind blown. First and foremost, when I was looking at it on the Asia server, as well as the EU and NA server on the premium shop, the prices do vary. It fluctuates a fair bit, but it's safe to say that if you live in Australia, for example, that if you want to buy the basic bundle for the warship itself with a 10-point commander and some boosters or whatever they have in the first bundle, you're looking at probably paying around about like 110 Australian dollars or around about 130 thereabouts, depending on the market, the pricing and everything. But as you look further into it, the Admiral pack, which has the big bundles on everything, the flags, the commander, 10-point as well, and all the stuff that comes with it, honestly, it's around about like $200 or $210. But the Rhode Island for the ship itself is around about like $220 and $301 for the whole thing, for the Admiralty pack. Honestly, when I looked at the whole thing with the Johnston, honestly, I was really disappointed. I really was really disappointed about how much you're going to pay for it. But you got 13.5 kilometer torpedoes, and if you spec it correctly, you can have it up to 73 knots, which is not too bad, honestly. And the Johnston does have a lot of, you know, cool things like the auto burst fire and also smoke and, well, engine boost. But the other thing that you have to take in consideration here is that you got the other Fletcher class destroyers like the Fletcher and the Tech Tree, and also the Velos and European destroyer line, as well as the black and also the Halford. But in the Johnston here, you got like the auto burst fire I was talking about. You got a choice of changing the engine boost to AA strong defense, semi armor piercing, SAP for short, which is pretty sweet, and it produces more damage than the actual HE shells. The funny thing about it all is that the ship itself is very maneuverable. It is actually fun to play with, and honestly, I never had so much fun playing with this destroyer. The only downside about it is just the cost, and the cost for buying this warship though isn't exactly value for money. Now, it really depends, you know, like how you want to build your Johnston in any way, shape or form with your commander build or anything like that. I would recommend, you know, tweak it as best you can, and also use World of Warship Ship Builder, for example, to muck around with it and just experiment, just to see what is available for you to put this ship together. The Johnston, in appearance for me, I mean, like, it's a nice Fletcher destroyer. I love it. I love Fletchers. I love the look of them. I actually love the fact that when I got my first tier 9 Fletcher destroyer, it was so cool. And I really enjoyed it. Mind you though, the modules that you see in here that I actually put together for the Johnston, I mean, like, I had been, you know, putting what was well recommended, but the 97 slot, I actually put, you know, some torpedo stuff. And I like torping. But the downside is, the torp reload is 2 minutes, which is bloody ridiculous. But the gunfiring range is 12.5 and the torp range is 13.5, so there's a bit of a downside of that as well too. But, you know, it was pretty cool. You know, I was pretty cool with it. I was actually loving it, and I enjoy the fact of having fun with this destroyer in some random battles. And honestly, the torpedo tubes modification 1 is something I have been considering for quite some while. But as I'm tweaking it here and showing a little bit of difference, it's actually kind of funny, you know, like when you look at it now that I changed it down to 69 knots. But if you look at the commander build here, that filling the tubes as well as the second points there, you can actually increase the speed a little bit, which is pretty nice. So I've decided to change my commander in his video for you all to show a little bit of different comparison. Now I did it deliberately just to show the stock standard, and the stock standard is 66 knots for the torpedoes for the Johnston. Now I have to admit though, I mean, like, when I saw that I was a bit like, yeah, disappointed, but I find it a lot better, you know, putting the fill the tubes and also the swift fish being added as a well recommended points in there. Honestly, having this in there is actually a good saving grace. I mean, like, I felt that, you know, like, having 73 knots torpedoes is actually better than nothing at all. But the downside of it all is that, as you know, and I know, that the reload time is 2 minutes thereabouts with the torpedoes. So you gotta go with the flow. You gotta go with the flow. But I have to admit that I thought about the other ships, like the Fletcher, the tech tree ship, the Fletcher, as well as the Halford, and also the Velos, the European Fletcher Velos, as well as the Black. Between all those destroyers, the Johnston doesn't really sit like in the top spots for me, because if you want your value for money worth, play the Fletcher. Play the Fletcher class destroyer from the tech tree line. It's free. All you have to worry about is just grinding up the XP for it and research it. After you got it, it's free. It's a tech tree ship, and it's actually just fun to play with. That's the only downside about it all. I mean, when I thought about it for quite some time, I have to admit that when I looked at Johnston, I was going like, you know, should I get it on my NA account? Because I already got this on my Asia account, as you can see. And so I decided to buy it outright on the North American server. Bought the whole Admiralty pack, paid about $205 for it in Australian currency. And I was not disappointed totally, but I was annoyed and a little bit frustrated that the fact that for good bundles like this, it should never be that very expensive for a very sacred holiday event like, you know, 4th of July to begin with. I mean, like, if I was an American citizen, for example, and I'm thinking about it in the back of my mind, if I was an American citizen to begin with, I would feel a little bit offended that they have to pay through the nose for it. but the sap shells on this destroyer is pretty sweet, and the reload time is actually not too bad. So I thought about it all, and I'm like, yeah, I still cannot justify the cost of the Johnston. I really cannot. So even though I bought the Johnston outright for the one-off because I love the naval history, I love, you know, everything about American warships, generally speaking, and I also have a lot of respect for the American community, as well as the EU community as well in Asia. But generally speaking, when I think about this, I just cannot believe that this destroyer, you know, is so damn expensive to get. But the ship's maneuverable. I have a lot of respect for that. It has a lot of, you know, good response time for when you want to reverse or slow down or kite away or move when you need to. But it's actually got, you know, good propulsion and maneuverability overall. So I'm still learning the ins and outs of it. Mind you though, that the depth charges come in handy. I mean, like, it's very good against the subs, which is pretty good. And in this battle here that we're just playing here, I am exploiting, you know, like what is best for the Johnston when he goes to countering the enemy. So you'll be detected by radar. So the thing is that I don't like going into the caps straight away. I actually try to stay away from the caps. So you can fire a single burst fire. It's actually not too bad. The sap shells is actually pretty nice. The sap shells reload time for it is pretty good. If you use the F function for the bursting fire, look at that, it's actually pretty good. It reminds me of another ship actually, the Forrest Sherman, but the Forrest Sherman already has that, you know, functionality with best reload time, but also the Austin as well too. But the torp reload is 2 minutes. Oh Jesus, okay. The torp reload is around 2 minutes plus. Yeah, see, 2 minutes and 25. Well, 2 minutes 30 thereabouts. I mean, like, I have to say that's a long torpedo reload. As I said, you know, like, I was really disappointed with the torpedo reload on the Johnston. But the thing is that, is this ship really focused on gunfire? Maybe. I think when I was looking at this, you know, warship a bit more closely, I felt that, you know, that this destroyer is really designed for gunboating. But you can't really go, you know, tic-tac-toe or head-to-head with, like, say, for example, a Groningen or Friesland or a Shimakaze or even Haragumo. You'll get eaten alive. There are some destroyers out there that can beat the Johnston hands down, even though you have this lovely bursting fire ability. The Johnston itself, if you think about it, the way you're going to play her and everything when it comes to, you know, domination maps, or even like this one, arms race, you have to play it a bit more defensively. Even though you want to spot ahead of your team and do what you have to do, it shows a lot of, you know, positivity in this around this. And there are some, you know, pros and cons with how you play this warship. It really is. And honestly, I feel that this ship, you know, has a lot of potential in going forward. The engine boost ability is very nice. It's pretty solid. And if you don't want engine boost, and I don't know why you don't want to have engine boost, but anyways, hypothetically speaking, if you don't want to have engine boost and you want to use like the defensive AA instead, then, you know, this is probably a better option to mix and match with your teammates. Honestly, as you can see here, that I'm just slowing down a little bit, trying to figure out what the enemy is up to, and as you can see, the response times of this vessel is pretty impressive, and that's what you want in a destroyer. The Fletcher destroyer itself, though, is actually just as good, but even better in some ways. And honestly, that the Halford, as you know, is a hybrid, you know, Fletcher. Well, I know that not many people are very much of a fan of a hybrid destroyer anyway, but it's actually, you know, pretty good. The concealment of this vessel is actually pretty sweet on the Johnston anyhow, with 5.8 and or anything less than that is actually pretty good. So that ship in many ways is actually pretty good. But the funny thing is you have 12.5 range in your guns and 13.5 range in your torpedoes. So yeah, I know the feeling there. Now I have to admit though that going head to head with a battleship is probably not the best idea, but at least you can actually farm these battleships pretty well, especially with these bursting fire if you aim it correctly. But the HE on this warship is not that solid on this destroyer, the Johnston. You're better off using sap shells. Honestly, I don't know why you would like to have HE shells to begin with. I think HE shells, in my opinion, is a bit of a dead loss. But if you look at on the Fletcher, the Halford, the Velos, and also the Black, you're probably better off using that instead, in all seriousness though. But the Black, the downside with the Black is that you got, ooh, I just scored a kill and then killed a mini Gumo. That's hilarious. Well, the funny thing about it all folks, is that with the Black, for example, even it's got 10.5, you know, is it 10.5 or 13.5? Anyway, it does have long torpedo range, but the thing is that the torps is very slow. But when you score some good damage on a Schlieffen or a rigger or anything like that, when the ships are stationary and they didn't realize it in the last minute, well, you actually get some good damage on it. I do remember taking out Seasoner on it at one point, and I still remember it was back in the day on convoy mode. It was actually hilarious. And honestly, I just find it, you know, with the Johnston, you know, like for the price you pay for the ship, and with the doubloons, or even for the real life money from the premium shop, it's not worth it, man. I mean, like, if the price of the ship was, you know, lowered down a fair bit, say for example, instead of like, you know, like 33k, maybe around about like, you know, 15k for example, it would have been a lot more justifiable. I mean, like 25,000 doubloons, for example, in Australian dollars is about 150 Australian. So yeah, yeah, again, many times I've said before, I still cannot justify it at this point in time. Oh, here we go. Bit of a cross-torping action coming in. But see how maneuverable and responsive it is? That's one thing I like about the Johnston. The Johnston is a good warship if you team it up with, say, for example, another American destroyer called the Venom, with your smoke, being both long and, well, for tactic-wise, for the Venom or the Johnston to use smoke and alternate, the Venom has got best torp reloads, and the gun firing on the Johnston is actually pretty impressive. So between the two of you, you have the best of both worlds. The other thing I found is that if you have a Fletcher teamed up with a Johnston, you actually do very well with it as well too. Now, I have to admit though that, you know, that in this game, for nowadays in World of Warships, that I just feel that, you know, when Wargaming pumps out a brand new warship in the fleet, I actually feel a little bit, you know, disappointed about it all, because like I had been expecting more and more better outcome for it. Whoops, I walked into that torp. But yeah, I just feel that, you know, out of all the things I've played in this game for World of Warships, I feel that right now, nowadays, that you're better off playing, well, you're better off playing, you know, the Fletcher, or the Black, or the Velos, or a different warship as well too. But honestly, the Fletcher class destroyer is better than Johnston, hands down. So that's the one thing I was a little bit generally disappointed about it. So just to recap, as you have seen that quick, replay or done there, the Johnston itself has some unique abilities. It's actually pretty nice, so that you can alternate, to whatever, suits you. But it's really coming down to what makes you happy. Honestly, I have to admit that the amount of ships that we have in this game for destroyer class wise, I mean, like, you probably find it that when you compare all these stats and specificness of the Johnston to the Black, the Halford, or the Fletcher, or even the Velos, you get to the point that, some of the ships have like radar, some of the ships have engine boost, some of them have smoke, some of them have better, torp distant range or gun firing range, all the rest, all the above. But at the end of the day, it's not about the ship, it's about how you play the ship. The Johnston can be a good destroyer if you play it correctly. Now, the thing is that the way I see the Johnston is that you can bring it out on the battlefield and have a lot of fun going close quarters with the enemy as well too. But remember, with the 2.5 minute torp reload time, it is a bit of a killer. So honestly, that's the only downside that I've seen about it all. But yeah, I just feel that, like when you're trying to compare all these ships and stuff like that, I just don't know where to begin when you're trying to figure out, what is best for you going forward with these ships. But honestly, I just feel that, when I'm looking around and trying to justify it every day about the fact that I want to get this ship for this reason, for this purpose. Every ship in this game does have a purpose. Every ship in this game also does have a way of doing things that is pretty beneficial for you and against you. But you see, when you're looking at different ships like the Black, for example, or even the Velos, and even the Halford and the Fletcher itself, you get to the point that you say like, well, if I can do this one, but the Johnston only can do smoke and engine boost, but doesn't have radar, or hydroacoustics, but it can, have the auto gun firing burst and things like that. You'll actually find it in the end that, in the end of the day, that you actually have a bit more respect towards a better ship overall to play with. Depending on how you want to spec your destroyers and stuff like that, you spec them to a way you feel is comfortable with. There are some people out there who spec their destroyers with the generic stuff, and that's fine, that's cool, but honestly, that's why I get to the point in my life when it gets to experimenting these warships. I justify it like the following reason, that I just love playing warships. I love collecting them. That's the one thing I actually got down to the point that, I actually asked myself, why did I get a Johnston to begin with on the NA server? Well, all I can say in my defense there was that I wanted to do it for the community. I wanted to do it for myself because I love collecting things. But yeah, I just, as I look at the containers that's available in the game that you can possibly win something nice out of, honestly, if you don't have any of the ships that's, the 1 out of 9 ships in that list, honestly, the Wings of Freedom containers are pretty beneficial. But if you look at the, for example, the big bundles for the Rodon and the Johnston, it's just too much. You see, I probably, would be kicking myself in here that I just feel that it's a waste, on a good destroyer. But hopefully, when it does become a coal warship or steel or Research Bureau warship, and when I think about it there, if it becomes an in-game currency ship, expect that, you know, the pricing of the ship will not be cheap in terms of, you know, acquiring it. But at least when you're acquiring a Johnston, you don't have to pay real life money to get it. And if you think about it, they did the same thing to the Black, and you may as well do the same thing to this. So if you love collecting warships, guys, then this is pretty much a good indication that you're probably better off waiting. Go get the Fletcher, grind it, it's free. Go get the Fletcher and enjoy it, and at least you know where you're at. Until then, folks, stay safe, take care, everybody. Hope you enjoyed this first impressions video of the Johnston. Anyways, I'll see you around. Have a good time, everybody, and stay safe out there. Action stations.